Okay. I'm gonna warn you guys, I don't feel very enthusiastic right now. I actually feel a little bit grumpy. And forgive the way that I look, I did not feel like putting on makeup, and it's also really cold, so it is what it is. I always say I don't mean to be a bummer, but honestly, guys, I am a little bit of a bummer, so but that's beside the point. Let's get into the video. It is the question of a lifetime. Am I going to do a PhD? The short answer is no, at least not right now. Hi, Editing Katie here. Before we really jump into the rest of this video, I just want to let you guys know that I filmed this video a really long time ago. I filmed this video, I want to say almost a year ago at this point, if not somewhere in the like 8 to 9 month ballpark. My thoughts and feelings have changed somewhat from the course of this video, but I still want to share my thoughts at that moment in time with you because I was getting that question a lot and it's genuinely how I felt at that moment in time, and I want to share what that journey has been like. So there's that. And then I also just want to say hi. It's been a long time since I've seen you guys. I haven't been posting on this YouTube channel for a variety of reasons, mostly being that I'm a very busy person these days. I work 3 different jobs, one of which is Still Accepted Society, which if you haven't checked them out, I will leave a link to them below. They're fantastic. And one of them I've been working since I was in high school, and then the other one is actually working in the historic fashion collection at the university I taught at last fall. I'm very happy to be in that position, but it does mean that I'm also very busy and very tired all of the time. So I've just kind of let YouTube take a bit of a back burner at the moment, but I have been posting a little bit more content over on my second channel called Fiber Gremlin, where I talk about all things fiber related, so knitting, textiles, and then also my work in the historic fashion collection. So I would recommend go watching those videos if you want a little bit more content from yours truly. And lastly, I would really love it if you would share with me in the comments what type of content you guys would like to see from me now that I'm no longer in school. I'm not saying that I won't ever be back in school in the future, but for the time being, I'm happily living my life working and getting to do things that I love. So let me know what kind of stuff you want to see. This channel has been almost entirely academic from the get-go, and my life in academia just looks a little different these days. I have ideas about ADHD content, about independent research, and things like that. So if that sounds good to you, let me know. And if you have ideas and things you'd like me to talk about, leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of the video. So why don't we just dive in? Recording this video was prompted by the fact that I recently posted on my Instagram stories that I was flirting with PhD programs again, and it got a response that I have not gotten on my Instagram stories maybe like ever. Thousands of people viewed it, I got tons of responses to that, and I was genuinely very confused by that response. One, because I just generally don't get that kind of engagement, but also I was like, I guess a little bit confused why people are so invested in one's and my academic journey. Turns out the general consensus seems to be that, you know, a lot of people still follow me from my academic content days, that people are nosy, and also that people just like genuinely enjoy watching others do their research, because research is, you know, typically centered around something that we're really passionate about, and getting to be a part of that passion in some way is something that's appealing on social media, apparently. I myself get severe imposter syndrome from watching other people do their research because I compare myself to them and feel like I'm never good enough, so we love that. But one of my followers was kind enough to point out the fact that I said I was going to do a video about whether or not I was going to do a PhD, and then I have not made that video until now. So we're here, we're sat, we're gonna talk a little bit about it. I have, in essence, like a pros and cons list, kind of explaining the nuance about where I'm at with the whole idea of doing a PhD. First, let's get a little bit of background information out of the way. If you've never watched one of my videos before, hello, I am Katie. I have finished a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a master's degree in something called fashion studies, which I love to describe as if fashion history, sociology, and anthropology all had a baby. It's very theoretical, it's very like contemporary anthropological and sociological research based, and I wrote my master's thesis on vintage markets. A house finch. 2 house finches just landed underneath the eaves of my window. Oh my god, are we gonna get a nest? That was magical. There was also a mourning dove hanging out on our car this morning. I love birds. Okay, deep breath, calm down. They're still there, it's so cute. Deep breath. Okay, what was I saying? Right, okay, my thesis. I wrote my master's thesis on vintage markets, but the research I was really passionate about during my graduate studies was about tradwives and the idea of, dressing femininity or dressing the ideal woman in the far right sphere of things, as well as research that focuses on things like ADHD, because I do, in fact, also have ADHD, and that will come into play later. As I have gone through this academic journey, I've also been documenting it here on YouTube and on Instagram, and it has in large part been a huge part of my life. It took me a really long time to get through the educational system. I am a non-traditional student. I went to community college, dropped out, went back, so on and so forth, and it took me until I was about 25 to finally finish my community college, transfer to a four-year university, graduated at 27, and then did the 2 years of my master's degree, and now I turn 30 in a couple of months. So not only have I not followed a traditional timeline, but I also spent a long time in school. It took me about 10 years to get to the point of doing a master's degree. So I've been in school for a really long time, and let me tell you, the process of leaving the life status of being a student and having to not do that anymore when you've been doing that for so long it has been a jarring experience, and I've been navigating it the best I know how. Luckily, I have jobs, multiple. We can talk about that another day. And most of them I really enjoy, and one of them is even in my field of study. So I'm enjoying things now, but that abrupt removal of a huge part of my identity was something huge to contend with. And it's been taking a lot out of me. I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. I did write down kind of a vague outline of how I want the video to go, which was the introduction and who I am, so now you guys understand that. I guess another thing I should say is that I have kind of toyed with the idea of continuing on to do a PhD for a long time. And I will say that perhaps part of that has been motivated by the fact that I didn't feel comfortable leaving that student status, and that getting to stay in that student status was really appealing to me because it meant I wouldn't have to undergo all of the identity shifting things that I've been going through, but I digress. I have talked about it. I have played around with the idea, flirted with it, and even talked about it on my social media in my content. So it makes sense that people want to know, am I going to do a PhD? Like I said in the introduction of the video, the answer is no, at least not right now. And before I get into the reasons why I don't want to do a PhD right now, let's talk about some of the reasons why I do actually think I would like to do a PhD at some point in the future. The first and the biggest thing is that I am largely interested in doing research, or at least I have been. We'll talk about how I'm feeling right now again in the reasons why I don't want to do a PhD. But for the majority of my time and experience in being a student and then being in a research degree for my master's degree, I've enjoyed doing research. I enjoy asking questions. I really enjoy learning. I enjoy the investigative process. I also really like doing anthropological research because I love people and I love talking to people. I think humans are fascinating. I mean, there's a reason why I have a degree in anthropology. So I like doing research. It's something that I think I've always enjoyed doing. I've always enjoyed learning something new, developing a new skill, learning a new perspective or a new way to look at the world, finding out answers to questions. It's just something that I genuinely enjoy, and I think the idea of getting essentially paid to be a researcher sounds like fun. I also have questions and research project ideas that I'm really interested in. And when I was in my senior year of undergrad and considering the different pathways I could take and thinking about grad school, one of the things that one of my professors told me was that in order to do a PhD, you have to have some kind of burning question that is going to fuel you through your PhD program. Because a PhD isn't simply being a researcher, there's a lot of other things that go on in a PhD. So basically, you need to have the passion, I guess. I'm not sure if that's how I want to frame it, but this is kind of, what I took away from that conversation. You have to have that much passion in order to essentially motivate you through a long program like a PhD. At the time when I was considering going into archaeology, I didn't have those kinds of questions, but now, having switched fields into fashion studies, I do have those kinds of questions. The kinds of questions that I'm asking are also relevant to things that are happening in the world. They're relevant in terms of like the direction that some research and fashion design and industry is moving towards. So it's like timely. They are things that I think I could investigate for a long time and that will have an actual like real life impact in the world, which like the number one thing I don't want to do is to do research that has no application, that only contributes to knowledge or only contributes to theoretical discussion, because that is a little bit soul-sucking to me. I don't like to do things that are only for the sake of doing them. I like to do things that have some kind of like physical, like, what's the word, like corporeal, that has some kind of like corporeal like effect or impact. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy one of my jobs right now. I am an artifact manager in a historic fashion collection. And not only am I getting to like handle the physical materials, but I'm also helping to make the collection more organized so people can actually use it. I'm developing teaching guides and I'm teaching students. Like it has a real like heft and impact to it. And what I did not like about my master's degree is that I did not find that in my research, which is like, it's its own thing. Like that's its own problem. I can't say that my master's degree is going to be what my PhD would be, but like, I guess that to pop in a con here real quick that I'll get into more again later, my master's degree and my experience of that is like largely impacting how I feel about PhDs right now, and I need time to sort through that. Anyways, I have research questions, I have interests, and I think that they will have like a real world physical corporeal impact. They'll be important, essentially. They'll be meaningful. I also wrote down that there are a couple of programs I'm interested in, like the structure, the advisors, the topics, they exist in the world, and that's really exciting, especially because there is one program that is doing PhD by publication rather than PhD by dissertation, and kind of testing that out in the humanities. And one of the things that I really struggled, I think suffered is a better word, that I suffered with in my master's degree was the fact that I had to stay so focused on one topic. Listen, maybe it's a me thing because I know that there are people with ADHD who can like really dive into one topic, but I am not that kind of ADHD person. I have to have the ability to do multiple things at once in order to survive, like in order to survive this existence. And so what I find appealing about a PhD by publication, even though it's considered more rigorous, is that I would have the chance to kind of look at a variety of things under an umbrella theme rather than trying to focus on one thing. Because let me tell you, during my master's thesis, having to like essentially put on the blinders and ignore the cool, novel, sparkly thing over here, it was physically painful and it had a real detrimental impact on my mental health. Having to stick to one thing as somebody with ADHD was actively bad for me. So the fact that there is a program out there that exists, and the fact that there is like a way to do PhD projects that allow me to kind of like dig into a couple of different things, that's largely appealing to me. And I'm so glad that that exists, because for a long time, I'm like, there's no way I would be able to survive a traditional PhD program because of that. That is another reason why I think I would want to do a PhD, is because like the system that works for me, works for my brain, exists. Which feels like such a low bar, but I digress. The next thing that I wrote down under reasons why I want to do a PhD is because I do think it would help me in my career in some way, because I do like to teach. You know, some people give the advice to not do a PhD because it makes you overqualified for a lot of roles and a lot of positions. And like, the thing is, I understand that perspective, and I'm not saying that I necessarily want to be just a professor, but be a professor and be a researcher, like a tenure track faculty member at a university. I could see that as one pathway, but there are a variety, again, of other things that I find interesting that I'd like to do. And I do think that a PhD and the way that I want to do a PhD would overall benefit my career, because I'm kind of looking at my career as an eclectic triangulation of like working with museum stuff and museum studies and teaching and students and that kind of stuff, and maybe doing a little bit of research over here, but also like still keeping a foot in accepted society and like a variety of things. And I think it's possible, and I think that a PhD would help me have more authority in terms of things like curation, while still allowing me some flexibility in the other things I want to do, if that makes sense. And then the last reason here is personal gratification, which I feel like kind of came through in my original point, in that I'm interested in pursuing research. When it comes to personal gratification, this is largely what is currently motivating me to finish editing an abstract for a call for papers for fashion theory, because I just want, like, the research that I've done for that call for papers, I just want it out there. It would be personally gratifying to me. And again, I think that it's like important knowledge that will have a meaningful impact in the real world. So that is something that I am considering in terms of whether or not to do a PhD. Like, am I personally fulfilled enough in my career pathway right now? Again, it hasn't been very long since I finished my master's degree, so I think it's important that I'm taking this time to consider that. But a PhD is appealing to me because of that personal gratification thing. Like, a question I sometimes get is like, Katie, how did you do the things that you've done? I guess kind of like, how were you not afraid to pursue the things that you've been interested in pursuing? Because I will admit, like, some of it's pretty risky, like taking on the amount of debt that I took on for my master's degree because I went to a freaking private school. It's a story for another day. But it's because when my ADHD just like gets fixated on something, like, I am like, that is the thing that I want to do. Like, the personal gratification aspect is something that is very important to me in my ADHD. So yeah, does that make sense? I feel like I'm talking really fast right now, and that like, this is all over the place, but I'd rather just film the video and get it out there than never film it at all. So, okay. So those are all the reasons why I think I would want to do a PhD. Let's talk about some of the reasons why I don't think I want to do a PhD. You're ready for this? The first thing I wrote down was that my mental health suffered severely during my master's degree. I know I already touched on this a little bit, but it is so true. But to be fair, there were a lot of other things that were going on in my personal life during my master's degree that significantly contributed to that poor mental health. And like, I don't even know where to start with it all. But for example, I was looking back at my diagnostic paperwork for when I had my psychological assessment for getting diagnosed with ADHD, and I scored so high in the depression index. And again, this is like a story for another time, and I guess actually I have made a video about this, about like, you know, the link between ADHD and depression, but I was so convinced that my ADHD diagnosis would fix everything that I ignored the other red flags that were happening, and I went untreated for both my ADHD and the severe depression I was experiencing, and the really severe anxiety that resulted from that combination throughout the entirety of my undergraduate and my master's degree. That's right. I finished my master's degree without any ADHD medication, or at least not until like the very end, maybe like from February to May is when I was medicated with my degree. And my thesis was due in April, so it's not like it really helped. Anyways, yeah, so there was really severe depression that was going untreated. There was ADHD that was going unmedicated. I was in therapy throughout all of that, which helped. But like, the difference that antidepressants have made is huge. And among all of that, I was also going through some like really, really challenging interpersonal conflict in my like personal relationships that added to this like degradation of like self-worth and self-identity. And so all of that was happening while I was doing my master's degree. And I do not know how to like separate those experiences out from the actual research and the actual like degree program itself. This is something that I really want to go back to therapy for, to like talk my way through, because anytime I think about doing a PhD, all I can think about is my master's degree experience. And don't get me wrong, I loved my program, I loved my cohort, they're some of my closest friends, I loved New York, but I just think about how miserable I was. And my brain says that if you were that miserable during an MA, you're going to be even more miserable than that doing a PhD. The thing is my circumstances have changed. That personal relationship conflict resolved, I'm medicated, I've been therapized, so I intellectually can say that I'm pretty sure it would be different, but the emotional reaction to that is something that I have not gotten over, and I don't think that I should do a PhD until that's something that I have a little bit of a better handle on. And I don't think I should do a PhD until I can sit down and say, here is how I know that my mental health was impacted by being in a program, and here are the tools that I have to help me approach it from a healthier, to cope with it in a healthier manner. I have to do that work before I can even think about doing a PhD again. I realize that that's really heavy, and that's a big thing, but it's the truth. And I just can't fathom doing a PhD right now when that is the context that I have to go off of. Does that make sense? If everything in my master's degree went so perfect and so smoothly, I'd be yeah, PhD, no, I know it's going to be harder, but I can do it. And I got through my master's degree and it was hard and I did it, but it was so excessively hard that I don't want to do that again. That was heavy. I need to take a second from that. I feel really vulnerable saying all of that. Okay, the next thing I wrote down was ADHD. Which is kind of funny that I'm filming this video right now because I was just watching Holly Jane's newest video where she says, how do the neurodivergent and disabled girlies, how are we actually doing our PhDs? So if she figures it out, let me know because I'd love to know. But I wrote down, knowing that denying my propensity for being engaged in a variety of things is actively detrimental to my mental health, aka focusing on just one PhD topic I think would be bad for me. I already said that, but that's there. I'm only just now properly and regularly medicated, which I also just said, but to be fair, even when I was medicated, I also just didn't take my meds the way that you're supposed to. So this is the first time in my entire life that I have reliably taken my medication, and it makes a big difference. It doesn't fix everything, and I still feel stupid on a daily basis and scatterbrained on a daily basis, but it does make a big difference. I also have reservations about how my ADHD has been treated both in the professional world and the academic world. It's still stigmatized against, and I didn't really realize that until I told a manager I had ADHD, and instead of directing me to HR to file my paperwork for reasonable accommodations as any sane and reasonable manager should do, I got yelled at. We love discrimination. Anyways, moving on. Another reason why I don't think I necessarily need to do a PhD right now is because I'm still doing independent research. I'm presenting at the Costume Society of America in June with some really incredible scholars, and I'm working on that call for papers. If it doesn't get accepted there, I'm going to submit it elsewhere, and I've been thinking about doing writing again, but I'm still doing things, and I still have some other research ideas based out of the collection I'm working in, so it's not impossible to do research outside of a program. Granted, it is harder. You don't have the same support, you don't have the same access, you don't have the same collaboration. Thankfully, I do still have access to my new school library account as an alumni. My husband is currently in graduate school, so I can use his library. I am employed by a university, so I get to use their library, and I am also a part of Accepted Society. So if there's anything I can't access from one of those three institutions, Accepted Society's got my back. And they also have something called the Fellows Membership, which is like directly geared towards independent researchers. So like I have that community collaborative support that way. Speaking of my partner, I do have a partner to think about. When we were both in undergraduate, we both transferred from community college to two different universities that were still, near each other, but we were like middle distance for about a year. And it was just really hard on us to be in undergraduate, like in our senior years, finishing at the same time, and still attempting to like be partners and be like closely connected with one another. And through that, we agreed that we didn't want to do graduate school at the same time. So we've been taking turns. I went first. He's doing his master's degree now, and I did not want to be in school during his master's degree, because we agreed that we wouldn't do that. I wanted to be able to have the time, the space, the energy to both financially support us, but also like emotionally and practically support us in things like domestic work. Yeah, and like doing the chores and having time to hang out with him when he's, done with his homework. So it's really important to the both of us that he and I are like having equitable educational experiences. And part of that is knowing when to step down and let your partner take the reins. The next one is, despite the fact that I do have ideas, I don't know which one I want to pursue right now because they are two vastly different ideas. One, again, has to do with tradwives and the far right, and the other one has to do with ADHD and like embodiment of ADHD through clothing. So like, I also just like don't know what I want to research. I have the ideas, but I haven't decided between them. There's pros and cons to both of them. I think a huge con of doing the tradwife research is that it makes me actively feel icky. Reading far-right rhetoric all the time and like anti-feminist language all the time is like not a good time, but it's also like important research. So it's like when I think about doing that kind of research for the amount of years it takes to do a PhD, I'm like, maybe not, but it's still just so dang interesting. Anyways, the point is I can't decide which one I want to do. And lastly, I simply do not want to think and write right now. I just don't want to do it. I have been doing it for so freaking long that I just I don't have I don't have words right now. I don't have thoughts. That's not true. I have too many thoughts is the problem. But like speaking academically, I'm like, bro, I just want to knit my little sweaters and like hang out right now, which means that the thought of doing a PhD is not an enthusiastic yes right now. And I am not going to commit myself to something that takes that much effort if it's not an enthusiastic yes. What is an enthusiastic yes is making my little knitted sweaters and yapping about yarn on my second channel. And I just want to pat myself on the back right here for a second because I think that it took me a lot of maturing to get to a place where I could say, I don't want to, so I'm not going to, and not be affected by imposter syndrome or, feeling like I should do things a certain way or feeling like I'm disappointing people if I'm not doing it or that I'm not good enough if I don't do it. Good enough for who? Like, who is judging me by these arbitrary standards I've set out for myself? I'd be lying if I didn't say that, like, going straight from a bachelor's to a master's degree wasn't in some way motivated by all of those feelings. Like, I have to keep going in school because it's, like, the identity that I've built for myself. It's what people expect from me. I'm scared of leaving academia when it's the space I've existed in for so long. And it is like a big vulnerable thing to leave that space into the unknown. And it really has been the unknown because I moved away from my like professional and academic network out in New York to the middle of central Illinois, in the Midwest where there's like not a lot of options for somebody with a degree like mine, and having to like sit in that uncertainty of what was going to come next and how uncomfortable that was. But rather than reacting to that fear and reacting to that anxiety and deciding to do something like a PhD right out the gate, which would not have been the right decision for me, I was able to be like, it's gonna be uncomfortable and it's gonna be scary, but like, it's what's right. I need a break. I need to not think. I need to even in some ways, sometimes just like straight up not engage in any of that academic work. I still do, you know, like from time to time, like at least once a week I'm reading a book or reading an academic article. And again, I work in the collection, but like otherwise I'm having fun watching TV shows that I never had the time for, getting back into hobbies that I never had the time for, being properly medicated and like emotionally stable for the first time since I can remember. So like I needed this. And until I start to feel the itch again, I'm not going to do a PhD. Will the desire, will that itch, will that urge, that motivation ever come back? You know, I don't know. I don't know if it will. I will say that like I've had moments of it. I've had like a little bit of a spark for it here and there, but it's not as present as it used to be. Again, because I think that mostly that spark was motivated by like anxiety and the need to prove something to other people. And I just don't think I need to prove anything to anybody right now. I proved to myself that I was capable of doing something that hard, that I was capable of doing research, that I was capable of moving across the country and living in an entirely new place and, you know, finding some kind of success in that world. And now I just want to prove that I'm capable of self-drafting a top-down raglan increased sleeve sweater. I keep coming back to knitting, but truly knitting is my favorite thing right now. So yeah, I really hope that none of this bummed you out or that it's coming across as flippant. I take all that I have said very seriously, and it's why I've come to the conclusion that I don't want to do a PhD right now. But you know, if that spark, that interest, that motivation, if it comes back, there'll be signs. There will be signs, mostly in that I will be posting on my Instagram story about applying to PhD programs. Right now, I'm really excited to see where my work with the collection goes. Things are shaken and moving over at Accepted Society, which I do work for them, full transparency, but I do recommend them if you're an independent or non-traditional scholar like myself. And I'm just enjoying the work there. I'm enjoying getting to watch my partner, like, blossom through his program and, you know, find his footing in a new career. Like, I'm just like enjoying things as they are right now. The imposter syndrome, the not feeling good enough, it creeps back in sometimes, but it's allowed to be there. I know that those feelings pass, and I do not want to live my life motivated by them anymore. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope that answers your question about whether or not I'm going to do a PhD. And for more, I guess you can subscribe to this channel, but I don't post on here very regularly anymore, so who knows when the next video will be. That is for the universe to know and you to find out by subscribing. And if you're interested in hearing more about my knitting and my other fiber universe shenanigans, including what it's like to be a fashion archivist, head on over to my second channel. And thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye!